Hi everybody, welcome back to the Eastfield Gunroom YouTube channel. And today we've got another first. As everybody knows, I'm a huge fan of Japanese shotguns, and for the first time on this channel, we are going to look at a Winchester today. And I mean, when I say Winchester, I mean a Japanese Winchester, a proper Winchester. Winchester is a name that is absolutely synonymous with shooting. You know, you can go back a long way, particularly in America. A huge history in terms of lever action rifles, etc., and even today, very popular. Sadly, Winchester are no longer producing shotguns. The latter years, they were produced in Portugal, in Viana, which is the same factory where they produce the Browning Maxus, and we don't have them in the UK anymore. But we do still have these absolute crackers from the 80s and 90s. The gun I've picked today is a Winchester 6500 second generation. And one of the reasons I've picked this gun is it's because historically it is a really famous shotgun here in the UK. So a very famous shooter, probably one of the world's most famous shooters, called A.J. Smith, A.J. Smoker Smith, that might jog a few memories. Apparently he was nicknamed that because he used to just turn clays to dust back in the, well, hang on a minute, we're going back to the 1990s certainly. And A.J. Smoker Smith used a Winchester 6500 to devastating effect. He won 2 world championships and 3 European championships with not this exact gun, but this exact model of gun. The 6500 was produced part of the old Incadenture group, which is we've looked at where the Nikko Shadow came from previously, and it superseded the very famous Winchester 101 series of shotguns. Towards the late 80s, I think this gun is about sort of 1987, 88. Winchester had a change of model style, if you like, and they changed quite a lot in terms of the action barrels, etc. And they came out with the 5000, 6000, 7000, and 8000 series. Now, there's quite a lot to get through there because you've got game guns, skeet guns, trap guns, sporters. Now, the 2 that were the most famous here in the UK was the 5500 and the 6500. 5500 are only available in sporting 28 and 30 inch fixed choke, because at the time a lot of sporters were still fixed choke, and also multi-choke using the Winchoke system. And the 6500, they did 2 versions. They did the first generation, which you got a bit of border scroll work, and then the very last one, they did the second generation, which is this one we're going to show you now, was completely plain and had a polished finished action. So at the time, in terms of competition sporting guns, these were massive. Okay, Beretta had only really just broken onto the circuit with the likes of the 682, sort of 3 or 4 years earlier, and these were so popular in the UK. This model was one of the last of the proper Winchesters because there was an amalgamation, well, say a partnership with a company called Classic Doubles, which we'll come on to probably in a few weeks on this channel. And I think the problem was that I know a lot of people have owned Winchesters for a number of years. You know, I've had quite a few, from sort of Grand Europeans down to guns like this. I've never actually owned a 5500 Sporter. I've always wanted to own one, but I've never found one that I've quite thought, yep, that's the gun for me. Which the 5500 is the same action barrels as this, and it's got this really kind of nice floral engraving on the action. I know a lot of people have owned Winchesters for a number of years, and for me, the problem is they kind of priced themselves out of the market, which is why they ended up with the Classic Doubles thing. Because when you bought a 101, which was 3, 4, 5 years before this gun, you had to buy all the bits on top. So if you bought a Winchester diamond grade, you had to buy a case, whereas you bought a Beretta and it came in a case, and they just got very expensive. It was almost kind of, they were a bit blasé in terms of the fact that they'd got the market for so long with the 101 range, did very well with the 55 and the 6500, and then it all came ever so slightly crashing down. That said, these are fantastic shotguns, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The second generation 6500 Sport, which we've got here. Now, this is a 30-inch barrel, which is quite unusual just from the point of view that at the time, 28-inch was still very, very popular. You know, a lot of guns you will see from this era were sort of 28-inch, 32-inch sporters hadn't really hit the market then. If you bought a 32-inch trap gun, sorry, a 32-inch over and under back then, it would almost certainly have been a trap gun. And they did do an 8500 model in this series, which has got a big step ribbon and ported barrels. Again, ported barrels were still very popular in the mid to late 1980s. Now, this gun was kind of years ahead of some of its competition. There's a couple of features on this gun that at the time were just kind of unheard of. But I also think, having looked back through some of the literature and spoke to some of the people that shot them, that those ideas kind of went under the radar a little bit. So first of all, like I said, we've got 30-inch barrels, and essentially it is a very similar kind of build to a 101 action in terms of the way it works, the hammers, cock, etc. So if we take the fore end off, this gun is bored at 18.6 millimeters. So at the time, you wouldn't have bought a shotgun with overbore barrels. It just didn't happen. Everything was nominal bored. So in terms of overboring, I would have to confirm this because I'm not 100%. It kind of looks like Winchester to me were kind of the pioneers. And that's why if you speak to someone that's owned a 5500, a 6500, they shoot extremely smoothly, regardless of the fact, and we'll move on to this in a second, that they've got this god-awful butt plate on the back, which you'd have thought would kick your shoulder to pieces. No, because the weight distribution and the balance and the overboring, which at the time was absolutely off the wall, just all came together and it coincided and it worked really, really, really well. On this gun, we have got an 11mm sporting rib with a tramline centre bead, and of course you've got vents along, well, the majority part of the barrel, and you've got the wind choke, multi-chokes. The other thing which is interesting with this is they were Magnum proof pretty much out the box. So they were proofed at 1200 kg, which means, let's just fast forward to today. If you wanted to shoot, again, we talked about what's going to happen with lead in the UK, with the lead ban, steel, etc. You could go and buy one of these off the shelf. It's Magnum proofed, and you could put a multi-choke, you could put some standard chokes in it, and you could shoot technically high performance steel. Not a problem whatsoever, because these guns were kind of, I'm not going to use the word over-engineered, but they were built to last in terms of regardless of what cartridge people wanted to put through them. So this one, 30-inch sporter, 2 3/4 inch chambers. They did do some 3-inch versions in the 101. I've never seen a later gun with 3-inch chambers. I will have to see if I can find one if such a thing exists and do a review on it. 30-inch, 11mm rib, and the polished action. I don't quite know what the thinking was behind the polished action because, you know, the 5500, which was essentially a cheaper gun, was more ornate in terms of the engraving. But what they did do, which was quite strange at the time, is they finished it, the top lever and sort of the fences, in this kind of powder-coated finish. Not quite sure why. I mean, you know, it's quite a nice contrast to the polished action. I'm not actually a fan of it. It looks like someone's kind of sprayed it with a spray can, but that's just my opinion. So this gun weighs in at 7 pounds 11 ounces. The balance, and this is one of the reasons they were popular, is absolutely superb. It doesn't feel like a gun that weighs that much because of where the point is, the balance. As an action design, not dissimilar to Miracle or certainly Nico, because Nico was made in the same factory, part of the Olin Cadentia group, but they've all got kind of similar seeds, backgrounds, if you like. But the balance on this gun, now again, when we do these reviews, I try and find guns that are completely unaltered and completely original. Look at that, absolutely spot on, and it just feels lovely. You can see why these guns were popular, without a doubt. I mean, even 35 years on, it still feels really, really good. You can still feel the build quality. Now, there's a lot of people that have owned Winchesters who will make a comment that, you know, they were sloppy when they were new. Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I've picked up some that have been. I had a Grand European once virtually unfired, and it still felt a little bit loose. But that's it's just a foible of a Winchester having a little bit of a headache. But as a gun, very, very durable, handle really well, great bit of kit. Adjustable trigger again. At the time, the Browning version, the Browning competition, was the Citori, which didn't have an adjustable trigger. So this would have been one of the first competition guns to have an adjustable trigger. So not only is it adjustable, you look at a gun that modern day standards like a Brett or a Browning, you might get 2 or 3 positions on the trigger that you can move it to in order to change the length of pull. Well, if you look here, it's got little notches on the trigger. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different positions. I mean, that was just, you know, ridiculous at the time. It's like, well, why would I want to change my trigger 7 positions? Whether you do or you don't, you could have. So it was fantastic. Woodwork. A lot of guns of this era were stocked with American walnut. You know, if you bought a Nikko, a Maruku, it was all American walnut. Winchester was no exception. And the good thing with American walnut is it was readily available and quite affordable. So, you know, even on a mid-range competition gun, not necessarily like this, but, you know, on a Miraku, you could get some reasonable quality wood for not a huge amount of money. Now, this kind of red ochre colour American walnut is typical of what you would have got at the time. Nice bit of figure. This is the original polyurethane finish, which is like a lacquer, which again, it's practical. People like oil finish stocks because, you know, they're not as shiny, but if you're going to go out in all weathers, like we do in the UK all the time, and it's going to hammer down with rain, the good thing with this is the rain will just run off it. You wipe it off with a cloth, and that's a much shorter cleaning regime. Schnabel forend. In all fairness, there wasn't else much in the late 1980s. If you bought a trap gun, it had a beaver tail. If you bought a sporter, it had a Schnabel. We hadn't really got manufacturers doing much else in terms of round ones like, you know, a lot of manufacturers using today. Those were pretty much the 2 options that you got. Even if you bought a game gun, it will be a Schnabel. Double point checkering. Huge fan of double point checkering. I still think it looks the most classy, the most refined. Yes, there's various patterns out today that are kind of a bit wacky and a bit weird. I'm not a fan of them. For me, I think a shotgun should look like a shotgun, and for that reason alone, double point checkering wins hands down every day for me. Full tank trigger guard. Again, it's kind of what you expected, even if you go back to Brownings of this era. I think they'd probably by then just started to do the short ones on the Citori, but prior to that, it was certainly a full tank trigger guard going sort of 2/3 of the way into the pistol grip. And I did touch on it very briefly at the start, but this horrendous factory fit Winchester butt plate, but it doesn't affect the shooting of the gun. You know, the primary objective of a recoil pad is to reduce recoil, but when you've got a gun that feels this good and handles this well and is this smooth with those, remember, revolutionary overbore barrels, you don't need a recoil pad. And of course, the advantage with these is they're nice and slidey and slippy, and they slip in the shoulder nice. So to summarize, even though these guns are no longer in production, do not discount one, because the build quality, the durability, and the handling of these guns is second to none. They can be picked up for not a lot of money, so I would urge anyone getting into the sport, go and have a look at Winchester, alongside many of the other brands that are out there. But these are, for what they are, for the value for money they offer, completely exceptional. Look at the 101 range, look at the 5500s, look at the 6500 like this is, and you will not be disappointed, because these guns will last a lifetime. Case in point, obviously people might be worried about an old gun being able to get the spares. It's exactly the same as if you've got a hammer gun that's made in 1873. If you can't get it, you make it, and it's as simple as that. And that's why many of these guns are still going today. That's the Winchester 6500. I'm Matthew Morgan for Eastfield Gunroom. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching. Cheers.